For nearly 5 decades, Graceland stood frozen in time, honoring Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll.
For almost 50 years, the attic at Elvis Presley's Graceland stayed locked tight. It was a dusty, forgotten space that even his closest family never stepped into. But when they finally opened it, what they found wasn't just old pictures or shiny jumpsuits. Someone had been living up there. The feelings it stirred were so personal, so deep, they were almost unsettling. Who had been hiding in Elvis's attic all this time? And did the Presley family know about it? Join us as we find out who has been in Elvis Presley's locked attic for 48 years. Gracelands Mysteries. On a cool spring day in 1957, a young Elvis Presley, just 22 years old, drove through the gates of what would soon become one of the most famous homes in the world. The big white house on the edge of Memphis cost $12,500 back then, almost $1 million in today's money. He didn't change the name. He liked it just the way it was. Graceland. At first, it was simply a home, but very quickly, Graceland became a part of Elvis himself. The land stretched out across almost 14 acres. There were barns, stables, and horses roaming the fields. The place was full of life. One of the wildest residents was a chimpanzee named Scatter. Elvis dressed him in tiny outfits and took him to parties. Scatter was always up to something, pulling women's skirts or snatching drinks right from people's hands. The staff used to say Scatter was just like Elvis's wild side, the one he didn't always show in public. By 1964, as the Beatles were taking over America, Elvis created a quiet spot just for himself. It was called the Meditation Garden. There were flowers, fountains, and white columns standing tall under the Tennessee sky. He would go there to sit, think, and get away from all the noise. It was nothing like his wild stage persona. This was the Elvis most people never got to see. Peaceful, quiet, thoughtful. While the garden showed his calm side, other parts of Graceland were more playful and flashy. One room, called the Jungle Room, had green shag carpet on the floor, and even on the walls. The furniture looked like something from a faraway island. Down in the basement, he had a TV room where he could watch 3 shows at once. That was a big deal in the 1960s. Over in the racquetball building, a piano stood where Elvis played his last songs just hours before he passed away.
Elvis Presley died here about 3:30 this afternoon. He had been found in his bathroom, unconscious, not breathing.
But everything changed on August 16, 1977. That was the day Elvis Presley died in his upstairs bathroom. From that moment on, Graceland wasn't just a home. It became a shrine, a mystery, and a frozen moment in time. In the days that followed, nearly 100,000 fans came to Memphis. They lined the streets, cried outside the gates, and waited to say goodbye. Inside the mansion, Elvis lay in a white suit and blue shirt. People who saw him like that would never forget it. On August 18th, 17 white Cadillacs led the funeral procession through the city. Famous faces like James Brown, Sammy Davis Jr., and Caroline Kennedy were there. So were Priscilla, 9-year-old Lisa Marie, and Elvis's heartbroken father, Vernon Presley. Elvis was buried next to his mother, Gladys, at Forest Hill Cemetery. The family hoped he could finally rest in peace, but that peace didn't last. Only 2 days after the funeral, something unthinkable happened. In the middle of the night, a group of men broke into the cemetery and tried to steal Elvis's coffin. They didn't succeed. They only damaged part of the tomb before they were caught. Still, the message was clear. Even in death, Elvis wasn't safe. Vernon Presley was crushed. He didn't want to risk anything else, so with the help of the police, he quietly had Elvis and Gladys moved. In the middle of the night, they were buried again, this time inside the meditation garden at Graceland, the very place Elvis had made for peace and quiet. That one decision changed Graceland again. It was no longer just a home or even a memorial. It became a fortress. Vernon added new alarms, hired guards to protect the grounds every hour of the day, and shut off access to certain places, especially the entire second floor and the attic above it. The official reason was simple: privacy. Elvis's bedroom, the bathroom where he died, and his personal space were to be left alone out of respect for the family. But over time, fewer people believed that story. When Graceland opened to the public in 1982, after Vernon passed away, fans were allowed to walk through most of the mansion. They saw the kitchen where Elvis made peanut butter and banana sandwiches, admired the bright stained glass windows in the living room, and stood quietly at his grave. But they were never allowed upstairs. The staircase was roped off. The attic door stayed shut. Even world leaders weren't allowed to go up there. Tour guides always gave the same answer: the upstairs is private, out of respect for the family. And that's how it stayed for 48 years. No one went upstairs. No one touched the attic. It became part of the mystery. Tourists would stare at the glittering gold records and rhinestone jumpsuits, but they always looked up, wondering what secrets were hidden just above them. But while the locked attic kept physical secrets out of reach, something even more unsettling was hiding in plain sight: the real story of how the king of rock and roll died. What did Elvis's doctor know that the rest of America didn't? The King Falls. On August 16, 1977, Graceland went quiet. The day started like many others in Elvis Presley's later years. The curtains were shut tight to keep out the afternoon sun, and the bedroom was dark and cool. At 42, Elvis had gotten used to staying up all night and sleeping through most of the day. Sometimes he would be awake for days before finally falling into a deep, induced sleep. His girlfriend, Ginger Alden, woke up around 2 in the afternoon, but Elvis was still in bed. That wasn't unusual. She went about her morning routine, thinking he'd get up eventually. But by the middle of the afternoon, something felt off. The house was too quiet. Around 2:30, Ginger knocked on the bathroom door. No answer. She pushed it open and found Elvis lying on the floor. His pajama bottoms were down by his ankles. His face had turned blue. She screamed for help. Joe Esposito, who was Elvis's road manager and close friend, ran upstairs. He started doing CPR right away, while someone else called an ambulance. The paramedics showed up in just a few minutes. They kept trying to bring him back while racing toward Baptist Memorial Hospital, sirens blaring through the hot Memphis streets. Doctors did everything they could, but by 3:30, they said Elvis Presley was dead. The news hit hard. Radio stations cut into their regular programs. Fans broke down in tears. How could the king, only 42 years old, be gone just like that? That same evening, Dr. Jerry Francisco, the medical examiner on the case, stood in front of reporters. He gave a short, clear answer. Elvis had died of cardiac arrhythmia. His heart just stopped beating. Natural causes, he said. End of story. But something didn't feel right. Even back in 1977, people could tell Elvis had changed a lot. The slim, energetic star had gained a lot of weight, almost 260 pounds. His performances were hit or miss. He forgot lyrics, talked too much between songs, and sometimes couldn't even stay on his feet without help. Behind the scenes, the medical truth was darker. The autopsy showed signs of years of harmful substance use, a heart that was too big, a swollen liver, and damage to his body that fit with long-term use of prescription substance. The toxicology report, which came later, showed what Dr. Francisco hadn't mentioned. Elvis's blood had high levels of powerful medications like and just to name a few. So why did Dr. Francisco lie? Some thought he wanted to protect Elvis's name and save his family from more pain. Others believed it was bigger than that, a cover-up to protect not just Elvis, but also the doctors who had kept giving him substance. That's where Dr. George Nicopolis comes in. Most people knew him as Dr. Nick. He had been Elvis's personal doctor since 1967. In just the last 8 months of Elvis's life, from January to August 1977, Dr. Nick wrote prescriptions for more than 10,000 pills, including and the year before wasn't much better. He had given out almost 19,000 pills in 1976. When people looked into it later, they found that in those 8 months before Elvis died, he had received 195 prescriptions. That's about one prescription every day and a half. Dr. Nick had an answer for everything. He said Elvis had real health problems, chronic pain from a head injury in the Army, bad glaucoma, and a painful gut condition called regional enteritis. He said the pills were needed to treat those things, but his most surprising excuse came later. He said he was actually trying to protect Elvis. Giving him all those meds, he claimed, was better than letting him get them off the street or from shady doctors. If I hadn't given them to him, he would have gotten them somewhere else, Dr. Nick told medical boards. He said he was trying to slowly cut down Elvis's harmful substance use while keeping an eye on him. But the Elvis people saw in those last days wasn't the same man who once changed music forever. He'd stay awake for days, pumped full of amphetamines, and then knock himself out with heavy sleeping pills. His eating habits were terrible. Tons of greasy food, followed by strong laxatives to try and lose weight. On his last day, Elvis had taken his usual mix of meds. He played racquetball early in the morning, then went back to bed with more pills. Those final doses were likely too much. His heart, already weakened by the weight and years of harmful substance use, just gave up. Tennessee officials didn't buy Dr. Nick's story. In 1980, he was charged with 14 counts of giving out too many pills, not just to Elvis, but to other patients too. A jury later found him not guilty. But that wasn't the end. The Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners kept looking into his work, and in 1995, 18 years after Elvis died, they took away his medical license for good. Then, in 2020, the story got even more complicated. A writer named Sally A. Hodel released a book called Destined to Die Young. In it, she said Elvis had serious health problems in his genes. According to her research, Elvis had something called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, a disorder that affects your lungs and liver. She also said he probably had a weak immune system, which could explain why he got sick so often and took so many medications. If she's right, then maybe Elvis wasn't just a harmful substance addict. Maybe he was really sick, trying to treat conditions doctors didn't fully understand back then. His trips to the hospital weren't just for pills, they might have been real emergencies. With the real reason behind Elvis's death still unclear, and his personal doctor losing his license in the end, you have to wonder, was someone trying to keep the truth hidden forever? Or maybe someone was finally trying to bring it out into the open? Fighting to keep secrets buried. Spring of 2024 brought news that shocked Elvis Presley's huge fan base. A company no one had heard of before called Nosani Investments and Private Lending, LLC, had quietly filed papers to auction off Graceland, the most famous rock and roll landmark in the world. According to court records, Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter and the only person in charge of his estate after Lisa Marie Presley passed away in 2023.
Lisa Marie Presley, the only child of Elvis, dead at 54. Her mother, Priscilla, confirming the news.
Was being accused of missing payments on a loan worth $3.8 million. The news came out of nowhere. Even the most loyal Elvis fans, who follow every detail about his life and legacy, were caught off guard. In no time, fan pages and forums were flooded with panic and confusion. Riley Keough's lawyers didn't waste time. They rushed to court in Shelby County, Tennessee, and filed an emergency request to stop the auction. Their claim was serious. The whole thing was fake. According to the documents they filed, Riley never signed anything with Nosany Investments. The signatures looked forged, like someone had faked her name just to take over Graceland. But time was running out. The auction date had already been set. If Riley's team couldn't get the court to step in fast, Graceland would be sold off in just a few days. And that meant everything inside. Elvis's personal things, his rare recordings, and even those rooms upstairs that no one was ever allowed to enter would be in the hands of total strangers. Then, just one day before the auction was supposed to happen, a judge in Tennessee gave his decision. He stopped the sale right away. He called Graceland a one-of-a-kind cultural asset and said losing it would hurt the public deeply. Even more telling, no one from Nosany Investments showed up in court. Riley's lawyers were there, but the company trying to sell Graceland wasn't. So the judge's decision went through without anyone challenging it. Graceland stayed in Presley hands. This wasn't the first time Graceland had drawn this kind of strange attention. Since Elvis died back in 1977, the house had become the center of one of the weirdest ideas in celebrity history: that Elvis Presley never really died. The first so-called sighting of Elvis came just hours after his death was announced. A man who looked just like him and called himself John Burroughs, a name Elvis actually used when he traveled, supposedly bought a one-way plane ticket to Buenos Aires at the Memphis airport. The witness said he was a heavier version of Elvis, wearing a white suit and sunglasses, even though it was late at night. Then, about 2 weeks later, a woman in Michigan said Elvis served her at a Burger King in Kalamazoo. She said she knew it was him the moment he asked if she wanted extra cheese. His voice was that familiar. Most people would have expected stories like these to die down, but they didn't. They just kept coming. By 1979, there were hundreds of reports across the country. Elvis was seen pumping gas in Oklahoma. Elvis is shopping in a Missouri grocery store. Elvis at a Nashville concert, wearing a fake beard. The stories became so popular that in 1988, the tabloid Weekly World News created a regular section called Elvis Watch, just to keep track of all the sightings. Over time, the theories became even wilder. Some said Elvis helped the FBI go after organized crime and then entered the Witness Protection Program. Others believed he faked his death to escape the stress of being so famous. One rumor even claimed he had cancer and wanted to die in peace, without the world watching. The people who believed these theories pointed to strange things about his funeral. They said his coffin weighed 900 pounds, way too heavy. They also wondered why the family chose a closed casket after already having a public viewing. And most famously, they noticed something odd on his gravestone. His middle name was spelled Aaron instead of Aaron. The family would never get that wrong, they said, unless Elvis wasn't actually in the grave. Then came the internet. In the early 2000s, entire websites popped up just to prove Elvis was still alive. YouTube videos tried to match his voice with a preacher named Bob Joyce, someone whose singing sounded uncannily like the king himself. Even now, in 2025, nearly 50 years later, online groups still argue about where Elvis might be. Some think he's living in a quiet town, using a different name. Others believe he still visits Graceland now and then, dressed up so no one will recognize him. For the Presley family, these theories have always been tricky. If they push back too hard, they seem like they're hiding something. If they say nothing, the rumors grow even crazier. But all these theories cover up something far more serious. Elvis didn't need to die when he did. His death could have been prevented if the people around him had cared more about his health than his money. But the wild stories about him still being alive let those people off the hook. So once the sale was stopped, Riley made a bold move. Riley Keough finally did what no one in her family ever had. She permitted to open the off-limits attic. What had been hidden up there for almost 50 years? The attic unlocked. On a cold morning in January 2025, a small group of archivists wearing white gloves climbed the narrow stairs that led up to the attic at Graceland. Their footsteps echoed in the empty space. No one had been up there since August 1977. The air was thick with dust, untouched for almost 50 years. But high above them, behind a locked door, one part of the mansion remained untouched. Sealed like a time capsule no one dared open. A single bare bulb lit up the lock as the lead archivist gently turned an old brass key that had stayed in the Presley family since Elvis passed away. The door creaked open, like it had been holding back years of waiting. As the light spilled in for the first time in nearly half a century, everyone went quiet. This wasn't just a dusty old storage space. It looked like a carefully kept time capsule. Either Elvis himself or someone close to him had neatly arranged the attic into sections, each one telling a different part of his life. The space was much bigger than anyone expected. It stretched across the whole top of the house, with dormer windows covered by thick blackout curtains. Unlike the rest of Graceland, which is known for its bold and flashy style, the attic was simple. It had plain wooden walls and bare floors. The room felt strangely cool, thanks to a small air conditioner that was still running. The maintenance crew at Graceland had kept it working all these years without ever going inside. Along one wall were dozens of boxes, each labeled in Elvis's own handwriting. The labels read, Tupelo 1945, First Recordings, Army Days, Hollywood, Comeback Special, and Vegas. It was like he had created a personal timeline of his own life. But what stood out the most was one box marked simply After, dated 1977, the year he died. The archivists started their careful work. They took pictures of every item before touching anything. Each box got its own number, and everything inside was listed carefully, just like in a museum. It would take months to go through it all, but some items immediately caught their attention. In the Tupelo section, they found an old teddy bear. It was missing one eye and had several patches. This wasn't a souvenir or a fan gift. Family records said this was Bear, Elvis's favorite toy from when he was a kid growing up poor. His mother, Gladys, had sewn the patches using bits of her own clothes. You could still see the faded flower patterns on its chest and arms. When Elvis's father, Vernon, went to jail in 1938 for writing bad checks, it left Gladys and little Elvis almost broke. During those scary months, Bear was Elvis's closest friend. In the Army Days section, they found a Bible that had been read so many times its spine was held together with electrical tape. This wasn't just any Bible, it had belonged to Gladys Presley. She gave it to Elvis when he joined the Army in 1958. Inside the front cover, she had written a message telling him to keep his faith during his service. Throughout the pages, Elvis had underlined verses and scribbled notes, questions, thoughts, and little prayers. One of the last entries was from August 1977, just days before he died. He had marked Psalm 23. One of the most touching discoveries was a leather-bound yearbook from Humes High School in Memphis. Elvis didn't usually sign classmates' books. He was shy and often teased for his clothes and odd style. But this one was full of signatures and notes. Classmates had written messages to him, many encouraging. One note said, "Keep singing, Elvis. You're going places." The Hollywood section showed a different side of Elvis, his struggle with fame. A leather jacket, made just for his role in Jailhouse Rock, had a small handwritten note in one pocket. It said, "Wear this when you need to disappear." Elvis had often said he felt stuck in his role as a celebrity and couldn't live a normal life. This jacket seemed like something he wore when he wanted to blend in, just enough to escape for a little while. Next to the movie items was a stack of books. These weren't what most people would expect from Elvis. They were about Eastern beliefs, religion, and big questions about life and what happens after we die. Many of them had underlines and notes in the margins. It showed a man searching deeply for answers, far beyond the gospel-singing image most people knew. In the Vegas section, the archivists came across something that stopped them in their tracks. A doctor's report from 1974 marked "confidential." The full contents are still sealed until the family reviews them, but the cover mentioned heart problems and said Elvis needed to make big lifestyle changes. Still, he kept performing for 3 more years after that. Lisa Marie Presley had known what was in the attic, but chose to respect her dad's wish to keep it private during her life. After she passed away in 2023, Riley Keough decided it was time to document, though not necessarily share, what was inside. The attic didn't hide an escape plan. It held the heart of a man who knew his time was short and took great care in shaping how the world would remember him. Old, dusty tapes held the last words of a man who knew the end was near. As the archivists listened, frozen in silence, Elvis's voice came through, shaky, full of feeling. What else was hiding in the dark corners of Graceland's attic? What was hidden in Elvis's attic? When a team of archivists finally opened the door to Elvis Presley's locked attic in the year 2025, it felt like stepping into a time machine. Everything inside had been untouched since August of 1977. The air was thick with silence, like it had been holding its breath for almost 50 years. But what they found wasn't just old stuff. It felt like pieces of a man the world thought it already knew. One of the most surprising discoveries was a stack of reel-to-reel tapes labeled in plain handwriting. Practice Sessions, 1976. These weren't the polished songs people were used to hearing. They weren't meant for anyone else. It was just Elvis, alone, trying things out. You could hear him mixing gospel, blues, and even some early electronic sounds. It was clear he was still playing with ideas, exploring directions no one ever saw him go. But then came the moment that made the room go completely quiet. It was a version of Unchained Melody, stripped down to just his voice, no music, no instruments. His voice was shaky, full of emotion. It was recorded just months before he died, and it didn't sound perfect, but that's what made it so powerful. One music expert later said it felt like he was facing his own death through the song. Every crack in his voice told you he wasn't just performing, he was feeling every word. As they kept digging, they found things way more personal than glittery stage outfits. Scribbled lyrics on napkins, hotel stationery, and notebook pages. Some had lines crossed out, others had tiny notes to himself. One sheet even had different lyrics to Suspicious Minds that never made it to the final version. It gave a real peek into how his mind worked. But maybe the saddest thing was the pile of unopened fan letters. Still sealed, just like they were when they arrived. There were letters from soldiers thanking him for lifting their spirits. Families shared stories of how his music got them through tough times. Young musicians asked for advice. One letter, postmarked 1976, begged him to take a break from touring and look after his health. It was never opened. Maybe if it had been, things could have turned out differently. Together, these attic finds told a deeper story than any biography ever had. They showed a man full of talent and pain, someone who made history but also saved old childhood toys. A man who took time to read letters from fans, even while struggling with his own problems. A man trying out bold, new music, even while his health was failing. For many fans, these discoveries gave them a sense of peace. The things he left behind weren't random junk. They were kept on purpose. It was like he wanted them to stay right there, at Graceland. But not everyone felt closure. Some felt the mystery only grew. Why were these deeply personal things hidden for nearly 5 decades? What else might still be locked away? Could there be more to Elvis's story that no one has uncovered yet? In 2018, Elvis was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It was one more sign of how much he meant to America, not just as a singer, but as someone who changed music forever. But maybe his real legacy isn't in the awards or records. Maybe it's in those attic boxes, where behind the gold trophies and flashy costumes was a man people are still trying to understand. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out another interesting video by clicking on the video shown on your screen. See you on the other side.